Throw it open for any questions. Go from there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Bruce.
Yes, I was just wondering. Last week, Monday, we were told at work that they're closing our facility down, and that kind of caught me by surprise. And so I've been spending time, obviously, with God in the heavens, and he's very mum on the whole thing. He's not talking. I don't know. I thought I'd get your impression as to this type of situation. If God's not talking, how do you normally proceed with something like this where you don't know? Because I don't know if I need to move now or what, because I only want to do what he wants me to do.
Sure. Yeah. So what are you asking him? Is the question.
Well, it's really, I'm just saying, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. If you want me to stay here, I'm in Albuquerque. If you want me to stay in Albuquerque, I'll stay here. If you want me to move with the company, they'll let me relocate. And I have preferences as where to relocate, but I also don't want to hinder what he wants to do and what my destiny is. So I'll say, I'll go anywhere you want me to go. I'd like to have a little bit of guidance as to what should I do next, Lord, or just be, with you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if he's not saying anything, I mean, don't normally have a problem hearing him talk to you or whatever? No?
No? No?
So in that sense, you've got to assume that he's not saying something for a reason. And whenever I get to that point where, okay, you're not giving me exactly what I'm asking for, I will go back and clarify. But obviously your heart in it is right, and he's looking at your heart. So if there was a reason that he wanted you to go to a specific place, then he would tell you what that specific place was. If you're not getting anything, then you've got a choice. You can do whatever you feel you want to do. and in that sense, quite often he sort of says, well, do whatever you want. I'm like, well, is it that simple? Yeah, in some situations. And then some situations it's very much, no, you have clear direction about what you need to do. And I think I go with peace in my heart over things like that, where I've not got a specific mandate or God is not giving me any direct instruction. Then I'm going to go with the mandate that I already have. I got my destiny. I have that as part of me. And I will look to draw on that to give me insight into choices I need to make. And then I go with my resonance. I resonate with certain things, so it's like, okay, you have a series of options. You can stay where you are, but I guess you can't stay where you are with your company. So you need another job. And therefore it's like, but you do have options to go to places and relocate with the company. Then I will be looking at the options, and I'll be looking and thinking, okay, what is aligned with my destiny? If it's not important, because some people's destiny is not fulfilled in any one particular place specifically. Some people's are. And if you're not in that one place, it's difficult to fulfill something because it's related to that dynamic of that place. A lot of people can go wherever because their destiny is an outworking of who they are, wherever they are, through wherever they are, rather than it necessarily need to be a specific place. So from that perspective, then, I look at what do I resonate with? Do I resonate with a particular place here? And I go with those senses. And then if I've got a clarity about it, I think, well, I think this is the place. Then I go back to God and say, is there any reason this isn't the place? And go back to him and check it out. And if he wants to, because some of it is he wants to treat us as adults and mature children rather than, for telling us what to do. He wants us to learn how to discern what to do. And that's sort of training our senses to learn to discern. And therefore I'm looking at something and I'm looking, am I drawn to this? When I get invitations to go to places, I used to go, God, do I have a mandate? And he would say yes or no. And then he stopped saying yes or no. And I'm like, but how do I know what am I supposed to say yes to? What am I? And it was like, well, what do you feel? You know? And so then I would like, okay, I need to now get my spirit and engage to what is the frequency of that invitation, and do I resonate with that frequency? And that's what I do now, majority of the time. Sometimes he will set something up for me and tell me to pursue this direction. Most of the time he's basically wanting me to discern how. And so now I get an invitation. Do I resonate with it? No. Well, I don't pursue it anymore. If I resonate with it, then I'll go and engage a little bit more, and I might do some research, but generally I will be okay. I'm going to go with my sort of spiritual instincts here that I'm learning to train to respond.
And that's the thing. I want to do it spiritually, because when I was going to move out here from Illinois, I'm looking at the weather, I'm looking at the temperatures and all that stuff, but I don't want to live my life based on what the temperatures are going to be. Now when I'm looking to moving, I'm thinking, well, I'd like to go to a church that's, I don't know, that it's a good fit, whatever that means, just the right type of church. I want to be kind of close to a decent airport so I can fly out to see my kids and stuff like that. So I have those thoughts in my mind, but I also at the same time, I want to do, Lord, whatever you want to do, let's just do that, because I don't want to live based on my desires anymore. I've done that my whole life.
Yeah. But there's a sense where when you resonate with something, the rest of the dynamics are an outworking of that, and it's okay to put in some, hey, this would be, okay, I'm drawn to this place. I feel I resonate with this place. Then where am I going to go in that place? And it's not wrong to have some things which will be helpful. That's not selfish desires. We should be able to frame our lives around favor and blessing. So if those things are going to create favor and blessing to you, they're not selfish. Now, if God wants to put a hold on anything, you're open for him to do so. But I would continue to go with, hey, if this is an area I feel drawn to, therefore I'm going to look at practicalities of this, and I'm going to go with that flow. I don't think, sometimes we can get really over spiritual and really try as if we're okay. Oh no, I can't do that. Well, why not? Does God not want you to be able to do the things that your desires are? Because the closer you are to him, the more the desires of his heart become the desires of your heart. But he also gives you a lot of freedom within it, how to do it. See, when we're little children, our parents tell us what to do a lot. Don't do this, or do this, or we're going here today, or we're going to go here, we're going to go to the doctor, whatever. They set the agenda for most of our life. And then we play, and in the playtime, we're learning to do things that we like in our playtime. And playtime is really important for actually for growing as a person. And a lot of things in playtime revolve around imagination and creativity, and all of that is designed to actually help us to continue to be creative as an adult. Most of that's taught out of us at school, when a lot of the system is not designed to help us be creative or to play a lot, and some of the preschool things that people are beginning to set up are about play, but play with a desire to help mature and grow. And people have found in studies that children who learn how to play creatively are much more creative throughout life than those who are restricted. So God wants you, in a sense, as a son, to be able to create some realities which are aligned to the desires of your heart, because those desires are not inherently selfish. Because you can tell even by what you're asking the question is, well, I want to do the heart of God in this. But if it's driven by, well, I don't want to make a mistake, or, oh, I want to get it right, or which there's a right way here and there's a lot of wrong ways, then you're sort of going to try and restrict those things to what you feel safe within boundaries in, rather than the creative sonship you've got to choose how to do things. And you can choose, how to do many things creatively, and they're all good, because the end result is that your desire is to outwork your destiny. And the way you do that can be multiple different dimensions to it. And they're all good dimensions if your heart's right. And you don't have to be concerned too much about getting it right. You just begin to choose to go with that where you will feel drawn and directed to, and then you begin to involve yourself creatively in it, which would be, for me in this situation, would be, okay, well, what would I want to create as a reality of where I could live? What sort of home do I want? What sort of, like, I want to be near to an airport. There's nothing wrong in that. Be creative and choose the things that you want, because that's what you'll start to get. Okay. If you leave it very generically, then you just get a generic type of thing. Be more specific, and there's nothing wrong in actually doing that at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Because I think a lot of people do get, well, I want to make sure I get it right, and I don't want to be in the wrong place. And actually underneath there's a fear motivation for that, which is aligned to sort of more of I want to be obedient, and actually God wants you to relax, because it's so much easier to discern when you feel relaxed rather than when you feel pressured or stressed to find an answer. When we're trying to find an answer, often it's more difficult to be in that place where your spirit soul are communicating in a way which things are flowing out of that oneness.
Yeah, you're right. I can tell the fear. I could sense the fear over the time. So you're right.
Because a lot of people, we still have an old covenant mindset, which is there must be one way and I need to get it right or else, and what God wants to bring us into a new covenant mindset is, hey, there's grace here to enable us to outwork our destiny, not as a duty or an obligation, but an opportunity, and with expectancy. And, if you're going to look at a situation of, okay, I have all these choices ahead of me, which one draws me? Is there one that draws me? If there is, then your spirit is, if there isn't, then it's like, okay, which one would I like to engage with? And if you don't get any checks in your spirit, then it's okay. And you could find that you have 10 opportunities and all of them are okay. But one of them may be drawing you more than the others. Well, that's okay, because you're submitting the whole process in a relational way with God, walking with you. And, he's not wanting to put us on a child harness that holds us back or keeps us things. He wants us to choose to walk closely with him. And he isn't always saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to go there, because we're walking in step. He doesn't want to be ahead of us. So we're having, well, where's God going? I need to follow him. We're just walking together relationally, and it has a different feel to it when you're in that relational perspective. So
would you say, though, as like forerunners, as we're considered forerunners, there's going to be an audience that's going to accept us, and many that probably won't, that there would be, maybe God would say, I have this group set aside for you because this is who I think is going to, or who's going to receive what you're going to bring?
If that's an issue, it may not be an issue at all, destiny-wise, because let's say maybe there isn't a group for you. Maybe you're supposed to go and start a group and draw people to you to do something new. So that would be better to go in a place where there isn't anything like that. Therefore, you can do something new. So it's really discerning, okay, yes, I think there's a sense where, okay, God, I'm going to ask you some questions around, and I'm not going to ask you with presumptive assumptions that I've already know. So, I want to be part of a group. Well, that to me is an assumption that God wants you part of a group. Have you asked him? Is this an opportunity? How do you develop that opportunity? And I don't try it and have those presumptions anymore, because I realize that those can be, well, that's just the thing. Well, everyone's going to choose to go because they want to go to a church that accepts them or whatever. And actually, maybe not. Maybe God's got something different for you.
Yeah.
Being open to ask the questions, I think, sort of opens up the avenues to a much broader perspective than the one we sort of keep into the boundaries that, well, I'll be safe if I find a good church that is sort of on the same journey, and I'll be okay because we'll whatever. And actually, God may have a completely different agenda.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I have found a lot in my life that, I thought I knew, and I really didn't. I was assuming a lot, simply because I never thought about asking him the questions in a broader sense. And when you ask one question, it usually opens up to 2 to 3 to 4, and you sort of all of a sudden it's just like, wow, there's a whole new horizon here to look at, a whole vista of things which I never even thought about the possibilities of before I started asking the questions. So, God may want to broaden your perspectives in some of it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Anyone else want to talk about anything? Ask something?
Mike.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want to ask whether this is part of the construction of mindset, or the construction of the head or something, the things that we know, just like, you showed in the during the conference. I just noticed that things of childhood that has happened in the past, and some things that causes pain, it's like it's going off me. I just can't remember them no more. So I was like, it's like my brain, something is happening that is just sifting stuff. And I kind of like, oh, I hope I'm not going, my head is not going funny, but that's what I'm feeling. And it just occurred to me, oh gosh, could this be the part of the construction of mindset and stuff like that? Because it's making me to forget, those pain, those past, teachers, and I said, Lord, fill me with something good in my head,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I do when I'm looking for the renewing of my mind, deconstruction from things, is for there to be a breaking of neural pathways linked to memories that are attached to trauma or anything else negative. And when you get those neural pathways split open, then you don't have a trigger to go down the route to remember what you had as a memory. So removing memories is part of that process. I have no record of quite a lot of things because God has removed those memories from me having dealt with the situations. Yeah. And I no longer remember, and I don't want to remember. I've no need to remember, because what's the point of remembering something that has no positive use, other than if it's going to be used in a redemptive thing to help somebody else. And so I see deconstruction and renewing of our mind as dealing with memories and rewiring our mind, not to dissociate from them because they're no longer part of my memory. I'm not trying to avoid, or, it's like, well, I don't want to go there. That's my soul. If I'm really going to have my mind renewed, there are, I believe, things that are no longer in my memory at all because they've been removed. So it's okay. And if you're open in the process of the renewal and deconstruction of the mind and expanding how you perceive and engage and how your consciousness works, You don't want it to be limited by previous ways of thinking or previous experiences. So whenever, let's say you do a court case or something and you get a verdict to change an area of your behavior or beliefs, then I apply the verdict to the neural pathways that are linked to those memories so that they no longer are triggered. You know, that's what a lot of people don't do that. They think that a verdict will just automatically change everything. But you go through a process of the application beginning to remove, and particularly remove for me some of the memories towards things which are no longer going to be helpful. I don't need them anymore in that way. So there's a real positive sense of expect your mind to be rewired and reconnected, and therefore the negative things to be removed.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's a very interesting process, deconstruction, you know.
It is.
And when your mind is deconstructed, it feels like, why did I ever believe that or think that could be true? It's almost like it does not compute any longer that you could have even countenanced that, and that might have been your belief system for your whole life. And as soon as it's deconstructed, it's like, why? How? It feels like there's no place for that, even possibility of that anymore, because now that has been removed and you have a truth that has shown that to be something, a lie, a less than truth, you know, a false perspective, and all of a sudden everything is now aligned to that new perspective. You know, and it's an ongoing process, because it is like a journey where one thing then leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And if you take the first step, there's a following pathway to come that will have associated steps. So I had many doctrinal positions and theological positions, that when I allowed the first one to be challenged, all of the others opened up as a result of that first one being challenged. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize there was so much in here that I thought was right, and I realize now was totally fruit of a poison tree. You know, and that's a term, I think a legal term, that they use when someone does a search without a warrant, and then what they find then is inadmissible. But it's not just what they find is inadmissible, but everything else that find led them to is now inadmissible, and they call it the fruit of a poison tree. And so I found a poison tree theologically, and then all of a sudden all of that opened up, of all the fruits of that poison tree I realized came from the same root. And it was like, no wonder I believe this and this, because I believe that, and now I don't believe that. Then this fruit and that fruit and that fruit and that fruit all suddenly just begin to wither, because they've got nothing feeding them anymore. You know, and that's really what, you know, Jesus cursed the tree, fig tree, and it withered from the roots up. You know, and that's what happens when, if you deal with the root of a particular thing, everything starts to wither, which is fruit. We have been taught to try and keep dealing with the fruit, keep chopping it down, keep chopping it down, keep chopping it off. You know, actually, if the root is still there, the fruit just keeps regrowing. Once that root is gone, there's no life that goes to any of those other things. And that works out in many different areas of our life. And, you know, I found that worked when I began to really go through this deconstruction process. I found that there were certain poisoned roots that affected many, many things I believed in my life. And when one got dealt with, the rest of them just fell away. You know, it wasn't difficult, but the initial root was difficult because that was very dug in. You know, and when you're trying to get rid of a sort of perennial weed in the garden, you got to make sure you get all the roots. Otherwise, it just regrows. You know, and I found that those initial roots were really difficult because they were really ingrained, embedded in my thinking.
Yep.
But when the first one was uprooted and pulled out, it was like all the others suddenly had no hold, and they just began one by one. It's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And they fell away. And it was great when that process was going on. It was a challenge because, you know, mindsets and belief systems ingrained are quite difficult.
Yeah.
But, you know, God was deconstructing me, removing those roots or pillars from my mind. And a lot of things began to change as a result of that.
Mm.
So it's a fun process, but can be very challenging.
Scary sometimes.
Well, hence, you know, in my teaching of it, you know, I ended up with 48 different parts of it when I didn't intend doing more than one or two parts.
Yeah.
But God said, okay, now I've got you on this journey. There's all sorts of things here that you never even contemplated from a new perspective, because the old perspective is just so ingrained in your thinking.
Yeah.
So as the old got challenged, the new became obvious.
Yes.
It was just like, oh yeah, why did I never see this before?
Mm. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Oh, don't be shy.
Mike?
Yep.
So old mindsets, because I'm becoming more and more aware of those, and how much I notice. I was talking to God about it one day, probably before I started learning for what you've been saying, and I was just became so aware of everything inside my head, which was seeming so messed up the way I was viewing things. I mean, at that moment, I could understand why people take their lives, because it had gotten so bad inside. And I asked him to remove all the tears, if you will. And he said to me that he couldn't do that because if he removed all the tears at once, I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Mm.
And I found that at times to be true, to where all of my thinking has been tied to incorrect bases or thought patterns to starting way back when. And it's like sometimes it's really difficult to even understand how to proceed when you're in that confusion. He doesn't see it that way apparently when he tells me, but I sure see it that way.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it is a process, and embracing the process is a key, and not fighting it. You know, to start with, I resisted it because it just challenged me too much. And then I realized, you know, that the challenge was God and his intention in it was good. Then I sort of relaxed a little bit more, and it was like, okay, I don't need to fight over this. You know, I'm going to surrender these things, and I'm going to allow him to deal with these things in his time as he's doing it. And before something replaces what you're having removed, it can feel like, where's my head? You know, what do I focus on here? Because this has been removed and I don't have a clarity about what's replacing it fully. And I felt the same way, you know, and when God said to me, you know, do you want me to pull these pillars out? You know, my reaction was yes. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to lose my mind if I don't have any framework of thinking, you know, and, you know, so I said, well, what are you going to replace it with? I said, well, can you do them one at a time? Because that will give me some time to adjust in that area that will lead on to another area. So then I've got an understanding of what that pillar did. So, I mean, some of the questions I asked in it is, okay, here's a pillar of belief that's held up the construct of my thinking. That pillar is removed. What mindset is that linked to? What belief system does that empower? What lies have I believed? And, you know, what truth will replace that lie? And I sort of had this little checklist of, you know, okay, how has this belief system affected my life? So then I would review the belief of this, also connected to the belief of that, and that enabled me to operate this way, and that gave me this behavioral pattern associated with that belief system. So I built up a picture, and when it got removed, what it felt like that constructed area of my thinking began to collapse. But I wanted to know how that affected me so I could see the difference. So I could see, okay, I'm not feeling that way anymore. I'm not thinking that way anymore. That's a direct result of that pillar being removed, because it affected these areas of my beliefs and this areas of my behavior. And he did do it one at a time. But some of the pillars had more of a powerful effect on me than others, because some of them I didn't even really know I knew I had, you know. So two of my pillars, one was Greek thinking and one was Hebrew thinking. And I'm like, okay, I got a bit of an understanding that Greek thinking thinks like this, Hebrew. So you don't want me to have Hebrew thinking either? No, he said, it's not the Hebrew thinking that's the issue. It's where that is actually affected how you work in the way which has become a construct which is not framed out of my thinking, but out of a system of Hebrew thinking or a system of Greek thinking. And so I thought, okay, because a lot of people today are learning Hebrew and all this stuff and being encouraged to learn Hebrew, and God is saying, hey, I want that Hebrew thinking pillar removed out of your mind. So I thought, well, I didn't even know I had one, and I don't even relate to the Hebrew stuff at all. He said, yeah, but you've adopted a system, and a system influences you, whether it be Greek or Hebrew. It's the system which is attached to other people's beliefs around it, not actually what God's thinking is. You know, God doesn't have Hebrew or Greek thinking. He just thinks like God. It's the mind of Christ thinking. And there are principles in various other cultures, obviously biblically, that when you look at the Old Testament and you look at the New Testament, there is this sense where some of this is understood through a Hebrew mindset or a Greek mindset. And understanding the mindset helps you to see, how does this relate to God's mind, not a system that man has developed. And I find that people are being drawn because they're told, if you don't understand Hebrew, then you won't understand these deeper things. And I'm like, well, I don't understand Hebrew, and God tells me deeper things. You know, I don't need to understand mysteries from learning Hebrew. So I'm like, okay. Now, I'm not, if people want to learn Hebrew, fine. You know, I would think for me, it would be more constructive for my time to be hanging out with God and asking him to talk to me, reveal things to me, than go through another system of, I'm going to learn this language, and this language is going to give me, you know, the gematria of all the letters and the numbers and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, that's going to take me years.
Yeah.
Why don't I just have this relationship with him? If he wants to tell me something, he can, rather than me going through another mediatorial system. And I think there's always a man-made system that develops to replace direct intimacy. Now, do I believe in living letters? Absolutely. Do I believe that they are living beings? Absolutely. Do I believe they're within the fabric of creation and help things to be created? Yeah. But I don't relate to them as I need now to relate to this living letter, because then God will be able to speak to me. God speaks to me. And intrinsic within it is the power of the life that's within his words, that I'm embracing directly from him without necessarily having to go through a mediator. If he sent a living letter to me, that would be great. But he hasn't. Just like if he sent an angel to me, that would be great. If he sent wisdom to me, that would be great. I engage when he institutes or engages that for me. I'm not looking to go through another mediator, engage him. And I think in renewing of the mind and removing those pillars, I developed a framework of thinking, which was, okay, I need to relate to what you're doing so I can embrace the process and really embrace the practical outworking of this, that my thinking is going to change in these areas. And I found that that worked. And because it enabled me to engage relationally. Because I think that's what God always wants. He doesn't want it to be a formula or some mechanical process. He wants to be in the process with us, relating to us and helping us to discern and engage through those things. So I was talking to him one day, and as I was talking to him about these sort of topics, and I'm saying, okay, I'm in this process of deconstruction. Is there anything that's going to be helpful to me? And he said, well, why didn't you think about these things, these questions? You know, how is this relating to what you believe, a mindset, a pattern? Oh, okay. So then I just started to think about those questions, and I would talk to him about them related to the different areas that my mind was being renewed, so that I can embrace it and engage it and then see it increased. But it is, everyone, of course, is different, and we've all got different ways of dealing with things and operating, I guess. But that's one that worked for me, you know, and I do have a sort of a questioning relationship in which I ask questions and talk. And that for me works. And he gives me the answers that I need rather than the answers I might want. But I trust in that process. So I don't really need to go back to another system within my mind. I want life. So eventually, when all these pillars got removed, I started tripping over the rubble because they weren't cleared away from my thinking. And that's where the whole issue of old covenant thinking came in, because he started to trip. I got tripped up when he started to talk to me about my thinking, because I was tripping over the rubble of old mindsets because they weren't cleared away. So it's not just a matter of deconstruction, there's site removal. You know, you need to clean a site before you build something on it. You know, and I had an old site and a whole lot of construction material that had all collapsed, but the site wasn't clear. So then he took me through the process of this issue, that issue, this issue, particularly for removing the things. And old covenant thinking was one powerful one, because I just didn't realize how much that I was operating in old covenant thinking that this had been deconstructed. Well, it had been, but I was still tripping over it. And so he took me through a few weeks where he just challenged me to think about what it is, you know, and I had so much of it ingrained in there, like, you know, wanting to be obedient. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, surely there's nothing wrong with wanting to be obedient, but why do you want to be obedient? Obedience is based on right or wrong. Get it right or get it wrong. And so he then challenged, why are you trying to be obedient? Because I was still thinking of a law-based system that needed obedience rather than cooperation. You see, if I'm cooperating in relationship, we're going to walk something out together. If I'm looking to be obedient, then I'm looking for a set of instructions to follow, which is not relational. You know, and the same thing came about, therefore, of duty and obligation rather than opportunity, and all of those things of like trying to please God. And, you know, and it was the same thing. Why are you trying to please me when you're already pleasing to me? You're already pleasing to me. How you can't do anything to make yourself more pleasing. But I still had a works mentality underneath. There was still rubble that was tripping over a works mentality, which is an earning something mentality, which you don't need to have. But trying to please God, that's what are you going to do to please God? Works. You know, and okay. So eventually it's like I had some sight clearance within my mind, which really cleared away some of the rubble that was still there, that was causing me to trip up. But I think there are lots of areas where we just don't even know until he begins to challenge it. And that's where it's so ingrained in our thinking, we wouldn't even think to ask a question about that because it's just, well, obvious. That's obviously true. Well, I found out that some of the things I obviously thought were true were very obviously not true in the end of the journey. But I embraced it. The more I went on to it, the easier it became. The less hard it was and the less confused I felt. But the shaking of it often created loosening it up so it could collapse. And that did feel quite, you know, like having mind quakes going on for a while, and some resistant areas that resisted certain things, you know, and eventually those things just fell away, and I, you know, really proactively engaged it. When I really realized what he was doing, I proactively engaged. I want more deconstruction. You know, I don't want to be holding on to or thinking in a way which is going to limit me or limit what I can do.
I've noticed that with my my old ways of thinking, I can't even, I find myself having to ask him for questions. Give me some questions to ask you, because I can't even think clearly enough because of my old ways of thinking to ask you proper questions to move forward.
Yeah. I found that when I came to a place of rest, and I knew that I was loved, and I was living out of that love, and therefore feeling every day as an opportunity here, and I'm grateful, and then, you know, thankful, and my whole sort of framework of life changed. I found that coming from that place of rest, everything became easier to connect to and to fit into. Because we can strive for things to know, or we can rest in him and allow him to open up the relationship at his pace, rather than my pace. You know, and sometimes we can get, you know, frustrated, or we can get impatient with the process. And I need to know more, and I need to miss. And I stopped that question in process, and I learned to come to a place of rest. From there, it was easier to hear when he was saying something, or to flow through the journey without having me trying to put my fingerprints all over it and get involved in it in a way which was my way of trying to deal with it, or my thinking around it. That's why, you know, when he asked me those questions, then I said, okay, I'll use those questions as a part of my framework. Fine. But during my deconstruction was also when I learned to begin to focus on how to meditate, and come to that place of rest within it. And it's so much easier from there, because it was the state of being that enables everything else to be, you know, and to flow. And I focused on that. So I stopped asking questions or trying to, well, what do I need to know? I just need to be. And everything I need to come to be will come to enable me to be. And if God wants to show me something, that's great. If he wants me to ask a question, that's great. But it will be from a place that I'm in rest, that all of those things begin to flow relationally from.
I have to remember that, because 2 months ago, I was walking with him down by the river, the Rio Grande, and I was saying, what can I do? What is my part in this process? And all I heard was just be. And that works for like a few days. So I have to keep reminding myself, because I asked him again like 3 weeks ago, something similar to that, and he said, just be. Oh, yeah, thank you. I have to remind myself just to be with them, relax.
Yeah, and that is when you then focus on just being, but not striving to. And this is it is difficult, because how do I just be? What do I do? What do I need to do to be? Well, you don't have to do anything to be. You just have to focus on being loved. Engage in love, allow him to love you. That gives you the security of just being, because you don't have to. It's unconditional. This is the key. New covenant grace is unconditional. His love is unconditional. It's applied to all his children. Sadly, a lot of his children don't know it or have not experienced it, but it's not conditional on our anything. And when we get hold of that, and we can start to allow the unconditional nature of God's grace, love, mercy, blessing, favor, all of those things, then that takes what do I need to do for this? What do I need to know to get this? Because again, that all of that's conditional on, well, I need to know this. It isn't conditional on anything. So sometimes God has to put us into a place where there isn't anything that I should be doing. And he removes some of the obligations that we may have had, thinking we should be doing certain things, to bring us to that point of rest where, hey, I don't need to do anything. And sometimes people start withdrawing from the things they are doing, because those things are compounding the problem. Because while you're doing, it's very difficult just to be, because the doing is so tied up with being. And so sometimes that's why God removes people from church situations. He will remove people from ministry situations for a season, so that they can get to that place where they can just be. And some people find it so wonderful just being, they don't want to go back to the doing. And we don't need to go back to doing in a wrong way, but everything begins to flow from being. And therefore I can be in this situation, and I can be in that situation, and I can be in that situation, and whatever comes out of my being is good, rather than what do I need to do in that situation? What do I need to do in this situation? No, just be there. Be. And around you, that releases an atmosphere of love and joy and peace and gratitude and thanksgiving that starts to draw positive things to you, rather than the negative things that are often, well, what do I need to do, and how do I need to do it? And we get tied up to that, because that's the system. That's the whole law-based system, because it's about getting it right and not getting it wrong, rather than from a perspective of, in a new covenant perspective, is permission to be. I have permission to be me. And the more I discover my identity in me, things flow out of me. The more I'm trying to do to create my identity, I'm just actually making the problem worse rather than better. So sometimes it's good to take a break and to take a rest, to learn to rest, that will reinvigorate everything from that place. And you see things from a different perspective at rest. But it is difficult, because it's so used to doing. What do you want me to do? It's quite often the answer, what do you want me to do? Well, and I don't ask that question anymore. I just ask, hey, where are we going today? It's a different thing. It's like, hey, let's hang out. And let's just be. And I think that begins to flow. Life flows so much easier from that being perspective. But it's so contradictory to most of what we've learned, particularly in the religious system.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much tied with doing, because the system relies on you doing stuff to keep it going. It's like, you know, what would the pastor say if everyone said, oh, God's called me to go on, a 6-month sabbatical from doing anything because he wants me to learn to be. What about our programs? You know, what will happen? The thing will collapse, because a system is designed to create guilt, really, around not doing stuff to keep the system going. Yeah, and God needs to break us free from the systems that create that guilt or obligation. And, you know, bless them, people in leadership who are responsible for keeping things going often resort to manipulation to get people to do things, whether it be giving or volunteering or doing those things. They'll put pressure on to get you to volunteer to do something to keep something going. Now, if we were focused more on relationship rather than programs, that wouldn't be the case, you know. But it is a challenge.
Very good.
Mike, yeah, sorry.
Yep.
What if like you make a deal with God, you know, and relax yourself and say, Lord, I'm going to trust you enough. This decision that I'm making, if it's not good for me or bad, you know, I trust you enough to stop me. So I'll carry on with peace, you know, what I feel led to do. So can you make a deal with God?
Well, the deal with God is a straightforward one. Just seek first the kingdom.
Yeah.
And everything else will be added. So the relationship is an ongoing walk that you don't do things independently. So as long as you're not making a deal that then you go off and do your own thing, you know, rather than, no, we're walking this out together. You're with me. I'm going to sense all the time if there's a step out of sync here, or something's coming across our path, or because we're walking this out together. Not well, I'm going to make a deal that I'm going to do what you want, and then you can show me later if there's something. I think that deal sort of is a non-relational deal. So long as what we're doing is relational, then it's okay. But in the questions that we look at is, why am I doing that? Is that feeding me, my identity? If I wasn't doing it, would I feel worse about myself? Is this coming from my soul? Is it other people who are putting me in a position of trying to get me to do those things? You know, and there are questions to ask around, you know, being, and just being able to relax and be, to identify really on whether we're doing things which we shouldn't be doing. And, you know, rest and erring on the side of rest, you know, not being pressured into doing something is key. You know, and it's good to evaluate sometimes. You know, what's occupying most of my time at the moment? You know, where's my focus? What is really stirring me at the minute? And like, okay. And I take it back to God and say, was this you? Is this you? Is this actually, you know? So review life, review what you're doing, you know, and sometimes just because God wanted you to do something at one stage doesn't mean he necessarily wants you to continue doing it forever. People will. Because once you're ingrained in a position that people are used to, they don't want you to back out of that position. But God may not want you in the same position. And therefore, it's being open all the time for that reevaluation and the checkup. Is this becoming something that I would find difficult to give up? If so, why? And is there something in that which needs to be looked at and addressed? No. So, you know, I think bargains are old covenant thinking, really. You know, yes, I think we can talk to God relationally and negotiate with him around things, and that's okay. But God always wants to be with us in it, not observing us doing something independently and then coming back to him for approval or not. You know, so much more of a relational process than that. Okay, anything else? Anyone else got anything they want to throw in before we finish?
Thanks, Mike.
No. Okay, all right, we'll leave it there then.